You've just closed the biggest deal of your life, 10 million, that will change everything. You're on top of the world, celebrating with the person you trust most. But 12 hours later, you wake up to find them gone, along with what they think is your fortune, and a cruel note that cuts deeper than any knife. Most people would crumble. Most people would rage. Most people would become victims of their own story. But what if I told you that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted? What if the person who thought they were playing chess was actually just a pawn in a master's game? This is the story of how one man turned the ultimate betrayal into the sweetest victory, and why his ex-wife's greed became her own prison sentence. Buckle up, because this tale of calculated revenge will leave you questioning everyone you trust. Success tastes different when you've bled for it. For months, I had been chasing this deal like a man possessed, traveling from city to city, surviving brutal negotiations that lasted until dawn, and enduring sleepless nights where coffee became my primary food group. This wasn't just another business transaction, this was my Mount Everest, my proof that years of grinding in obscurity had finally paid off. The conference room was thick with tension as we approached the final signatures. Lawyers shuffled papers with the precision of surgeons, while executives whispered in hushed tones about numbers that could change lives. I remember the weight of the moment pressing down on my shoulders, the realization that everything I had worked for was condensed into this single, pivotal instant. At exactly 7:42 p.m., the final signature was inked. I glanced at my Rolex, a gift I'd bought myself after my first million, and smiled with the satisfaction of a man who had just conquered his demons. This is the moment I'll remember for the rest of my life, I thought to myself, completely unaware of how prophetic those words would become. The client, an eccentric billionaire with a flair for the theatrical, had prepared what he called the celebratory handoff, a symbolic leather duffel bag filled with what looked like crisp $100 bills. Of course, the real $10 million was being transferred through proper banking channels, clean and legal, but he wanted me to feel the weight of success. The bag was heavy, substantial, and filled with the kind of realistic replica currency used in Hollywood productions. "Take it home," he said with a grin that could have sold ice to Eskimos. "Let it sink in. You've earned this moment." As I drove home through the neon-lit streets, the bag sitting in my passenger seat like a sleeping dragon, I felt invincible. The city lights blurred past my windows, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future without the constant anxiety of financial uncertainty. My wife Ria was waiting for me when I walked through the door of our downtown high-rise apartment. She stood there in silk pajamas that caught the lamplight perfectly, wine glass in hand, looking like something out of a luxury magazine. Her smile was radiant as I set the bag down on our marble kitchen counter. "What's that?" she asked, her eyes dancing with curiosity. I kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her expensive perfume. "A trophy," I said proudly. $10 million in proof that your husband just changed our lives forever." Her eyes widened, sparkling with what I mistook for shared excitement. "Is it real?" I chuckled, still riding the high of my victory. "Technically no, it's all for show, packed with fake bills. The real money is already in escrow, transferring to our accounts Monday morning." "But it feels real, doesn't it?" She laughed with me, but I noticed how her hands lingered on the bag, her fingers tracing the leather with an almost possessive touch. "You trust me with it?" she asked, her voice carrying a playful tone that I now recognize as something far more calculated. I shrugged, exhaustion finally catching up with me. "Why not? You're my wife." Ria's smile widened, and there was something in it, something I was too tired and too trusting to recognize. "Sweet dreams, successful man," she whispered. "I'll keep it safe in the closet tonight, just in case." I nodded, kissed her goodnight, and collapsed into the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Success, it seemed, was the perfect sleeping pill. When I woke up the next morning, the silence felt wrong. The apartment had an emptiness that went beyond the absence of sound. It was the kind of hollow quiet that comes when something fundamental has been ripped away. Ria was gone. Her side of the closet gapped open like a wound, stripped bare of everything she had claimed as hers. Her jewelry box sat empty on the dresser, and her phones, all three of them, had been disconnected. The money bag had vanished without a trace. On the kitchen counter, in the exact spot where she usually left my morning coffee, sat a single folded piece of paper. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it, already knowing that whatever was written there would change everything. "Thanks for the money, babe." I'm starting over with my boyfriend. Good luck starting from scratch. Ria, I stared at those words for what felt like an eternity, letting them sink into my consciousness like poison into bloodstream. Then, something unexpected happened. I laughed out. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a deep, uncontrollable laugh that echoed through the empty apartment. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, until my sides ached, until the absurdity of the situation became crystal clear. Because the bag she had stolen, the bag she thought contained her ticket to freedom, was filled with nothing but worthless replica bills and a GPS tracker that was, at that very moment, broadcasting her location to my phone. Ria thought she was clever, and in many ways, she was. She had waited until I was in the deepest phase of sleep, probably listening to my breathing, to make sure I wouldn't wake up. Then she had tiptoed to the closet, grabbed what she believed was her golden ticket, and fled into the night like some modern-day femme fatale from a Netflix heist drama. I could picture her smirking as she quietly closed the door behind her, whispering to herself, "He'll never see this coming." And in one sense, she was absolutely right. I hadn't seen the betrayal coming, but what she hadn't seen was the chess game I had been playing for months without even realizing it. You see, I didn't just deal with money in my line of work. I dealt with risk, with snakes in expensive suits, and betrayal dressed up in handshakes and smiles. Over the years, I had learned that the business world is filled with people who will smile at your face while sharpening knives behind their backs. And somewhere deep in my subconscious, a voice had always whispered that if I ever got too comfortable, if I ever let my guard down completely, I would lose everything. So months earlier, during the early phases of contract negotiations, I had commissioned a very special bag. To the naked eye, it was indistinguishable from any other luxury leather duffel crafted by the same artisan who made bags for A-list celebrities and Fortune 500 executives. But this bag had been designed with a specific purpose in mind. First, it was filled with high-grade replica currency, the kind used in major Hollywood productions. Each bill was perfect in weight, texture, and appearance, but completely worthless in the real world. More importantly, stitched discreetly into the bottom lining and disguised as a designer logo tag, was a military-grade GPS tracker with a battery life of 6 months. This wasn't paranoia, this was insurance. I sat down at my home office desk, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and opened the tracking app on my phone. There it was, a little red dot moving steadily southbound at 68 miles per hour along Highway 17. But the GPS tracker wasn't my only ace in the hole. I opened my laptop and accessed my cloud-based security camera system. The footage was crystal clear. To 17 a.m., Ria in a black hoodie and designer leggings, slipping out our front door like a thief in the night. 2:19 a.m., she stopped at a familiar car parked across the street to kiss someone, a tall, scruffy figure that I recognized immediately, Darren Martinez, my former gym buddy, the guy who used to come over for Monday night football and game nights, the guy who always lingered a little too long when Ria laughed at his jokes, who always found excuses to brush against her when he thought I wasn't looking. I zoomed in on the video, pausing at the frame where they were both carrying the bag together, toward his beat-up Honda Civic. Even in the grainy footage, I could see their excitement, their shared sense of triumph at pulling off what they thought was the perfect crime. They were probably high-fiving and planning their new life together, imagining how they would spend their stolen millions. Darren had always been jealous of my success, always making passive-aggressive comments about how some people get all the luck. Now, he thought he was finally getting his piece of the pie. The tracker showed they were heading toward Darren's weekend rental, a cheap little cabin on the outskirts of town that he used for his fishing trips. I had been there once, about a year ago, when he had invited a group of us for a weekend getaway. It wasn't much to look at, a rundown shack surrounded by pine trees and bad cell service, but I imagined to them it must have felt like the first step into their millionaire lifestyle. I could picture the scene, candles lit, champagne bottles popped open, probably bought with the credit cards they thought would soon be paid off, soft music playing in the background as they unzipped the bag with trembling hands, expecting to see crisp stacks of freedom. Instead, they found worthless paper and broken dreams. My phone buzzed at 9:47 a.m., block number. I answered on speaker, sipping my coffee like it was just another Tuesday morning. "Hello, John?" Ria's voice hissed through the speaker, barely composed, crackling with fury and desperation. "Good morning, sunshine," I replied cheerfully. "Sleeping. Rough in the woods now. Are we? How's that working out for you? You gave me fake money, she screamed. No, Rhea. I corrected, my voice calm and measured. You stole fake money. There's a significant legal difference between those two things. You planned this? Her voice was shaking now, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. You bet I did, I said, taking another sip of coffee. I'm a strategist, darling. And I told you once I only trust people who've earned it. You just proved exactly why. I let the silence stretch between us, enjoying the sound of her rapid breathing and muffled cursing. Then I added, almost casually, oh, and by the way, you and Darren might want to pack up and move quickly. What do you mean? I refreshed the tracking app, watching the little red dot that was still pinging steadily from the cabin. Well, you see, while I let your little heist run its course for entertainment purposes, I've now officially reported the bag as stolen. The police have your names, your location, and video evidence of the theft. They should be arriving. Oh, I'd say within the next 20 minutes. You wouldn't dare, oh, but I already did. Have a wonderful day, and good luck starting from scratch. Click. 23 minutes after I hung up the phone, the GPS tracker stopped moving. They had probably ditched the car or thrown the bag into the woods, thinking that would be enough to make them disappear into thin air. Amateurs. But I hadn't just planned for betrayal, I had planned for panic, for desperation, for every possible move they might make once they realized they had been outplayed. The police report I had filed wasn't just a simple theft claim. I had documented everything. The symbolic nature of the bag in relation to a major corporate transaction, the video footage showing clear intent to steal, license plate details, and most importantly, a digital affidavit identifying Rhea and Darren as the last known individuals in possession of the stolen property. Here's what most people don't understand about the law. Even if the bag contained fake money, the intent to steal corporate property tied to a multi-million-dollar deal still constitutes serious criminal charges. And since my client's law firm had been copied on the police report and filed supporting documentation, the case was automatically elevated to federal-level corporate fraud. This meant law enforcement had no choice but to treat it as a high priority. Case at 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer, accompanied by a photo that made me smile wider than I had in years. The image showed Darren face down on the hood of a police cruiser, hands cuffed behind his back, while Rhea stood in the background, mascara streaking down her cheeks, screaming at officers in the gravel driveway of that pathetic rental cabin. The message read, "Arrested without incident. Police recovered the bag and confirmed its contents match your description. DA is considering charges. Do you want to press for felony theft or are you willing to negotiate?" I stared at that photo for a long time, studying every detail. Darren's expensive sneakers, probably bought with money he'd borrowed from friends, planning to pay them back with stolen millions. Rhea's designer workout clothes, now dirty and torn from their panicked attempt to hide evidence. The look of absolute defeat and disbelief on both their faces as reality crashed down around them. This was what justice looked like. 2 days later, I found myself in a sterile conference room at the downtown police station. Rhea and Darren were being held in separate cells, waiting to hear if the district attorney would formally press charges. The case was solid video evidence, GPS tracking data, witness statements, and a clear paper trail documenting their theft of corporate property. I made my statement calmly and professionally, handed over all the digital evidence, confirmed that the bag was indeed company property used for legitimate business purposes, and signed the necessary paperwork. But I had one condition for agreeing to reduce charges. The arrest records would remain public and unsealed, no matter what plea deals were negotiated. During the mediation session, Rhea's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender with coffee stains on his shirt, pleaded with me desperately. "She'll lose everything if this goes on her permanent record," he said, shuffling through papers with shaking hands. "She has no prior criminal history. Think about her reputation, her future employment prospects." I leaned back in my chair, studying him with the same cold calculation I used in business negotiations. "Oh, I am thinking about her reputation," I replied. "I'm thinking about how the next man she meets will Google her name and know exactly what she's capable of." He blinked rapidly, clearly unprepared for my response. "But surely she deserves a second chance. She stole from her husband and ran away with his friend," I interrupted. "She'll get a second chance when she earns it." I signed the final paperwork, stood up, and looked him directly in the eyes. "Tell her I said good luck starting from scratch." Rhea was released on bail 3 days later. I had agreed not to press for maximum charges in exchange for the public record remaining unsealed, but the damage to her life was already irreversible and spreading like wildfire. The moment her arrest photo hit the local news websites and social media, her carefully constructed world began to implode. Friends who had once envied her lifestyle suddenly stopped returning her calls. Her job at the upscale marketing firm where she had worked for 5 years terminated the morning after her mugshot went viral. Social media became a minefield of judgment and ridicule. Comments flooded in from strangers and acquaintances alike. Gold-digging traitor, karma is beautiful, what goes around comes around. The hashtag Baglity started trending locally, with people sharing the story and adding their own commentary about trust, betrayal, and justice. But the real devastation came from her own family. I hadn't contacted them directly, I didn't need to. The internet had done the work for me. Her mother sent me a brief email that arrived in my inbox like a perfectly aimed arrow. John, I am so deeply sorry for what my daughter has done. We had no idea she was capable of such betrayal. You didn't deserve this after everything you've accomplished. Please know that we support whatever decisions you make going forward. Margaret, I didn't reply to that email because I was already done talking about Rhea. I was focused on rebuilding, on rising from the ashes of betrayal stronger and more successful than ever before. Meanwhile, my business was thriving in ways I had never imagined possible. The $10 million deal went through without a hitch, and my client, impressed by how professionally I had handled the attempted theft, introduced me to 3 new corporate partners. My firm expanded into 2 new markets within a month, and I hired a small team of loyal professionals who understood that trust is earned, not given. But even more importantly, I used Rhea's betrayal as fuel for my personal brand. I published an article on LinkedIn titled "What I Learned About Business After Someone I Love Tried to Steal Everything." The post went viral, not because I named names or aired dirty laundry, but because the message resonated with anyone who had ever been betrayed in business or personal relationships. The article attracted speaking offers, book deal inquiries, and even a documentary producer who wanted to tell my story. I became known as the executive who turned betrayal into triumph, who showed that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding despite those who try to tear you down. All the while, Rhea was struggling to rebuild a reputation that had never really been hers to begin with. She was living in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in a rundown neighborhood, working temp jobs that barely paid the rent, and dealing with the reality that her name was now permanently associated with theft and betrayal. 6 months after her arrest, I decided to send her one final message. I had a contact in real estate who helped me locate her new address, a depressing complex on the wrong side of town, far from the luxury high-rise we had once shared. I sent a package to her door. Inside was a single fake $100 bill, a flash drive containing all the surveillance footage from that night, and a handwritten note in black ink. This is what you stole. This is what you lost. This is why. You'll never matter to me again. No anger, no threats of further revenge, no dramatic declarations. Just closure. The kind that wraps around someone's throat like a silk noose, quiet, elegant, and absolutely final. A full year passed like the changing of seasons, each month bringing new growth, new opportunities, and new proof that cutting away the rot from my life had been the best decision I ever made. I was no longer the man who had handed over his trust in a duffel bag. No longer the husband who had quietly ignored the warning signs, hoping his wife would stop looking over his shoulder for someone better. I had become sharper, wiser, and richer in every way that truly mattered. My company now operated from 3 offices across 2 states. I had assembled a leadership team of individuals who understood that loyalty is a 2-way street and that success comes from lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. We had developed a company culture built on earned trust, mutual respect, and the kind of professional integrity that attracts high-quality clients and talented employees. I had even started dating again, carefully, selectively, with the wisdom that comes from having survived betrayal. I was no longer desperate for someone to complete me because I had already rebuilt myself into someone whole and self-sufficient. Then, on the exact 1-year anniversary of the deal that had changed everything, I received a message from a burner account. No name, no profile picture, just a single line of text that appeared on my phone screen like a ghost from the past. You won. I lost everything. Hope you're happy. I didn't need to ask who had sent it. I could feel Rhea's desperation and defeat. radiating through those words, could picture her typing and retyping the message, probably deleting dozens of longer versions before settling on this final, pathetic surrender. I stared at the message for several minutes, not with rage or satisfaction, but with the kind of quiet reflection that comes when a chapter of your life finally closes completely. Then I typed back a response that had taken me a year to fully understand. You didn't lose everything, Ria. You just never earned anything. To begin with, blocked, deleted, forgotten. I never heard from her again. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about burning bridges or destroying your enemies. It's about building castles on the ashes of what they tried to take from you, becoming so successful and fulfilled that they can only watch from a distance they can never cross again. True victory isn't making someone suffer, it's making them irrelevant. When people ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to Ria, I tell them the truth. I didn't destroy her life. She destroyed it herself. The moment she chose betrayal over loyalty, theft over honesty, shortcuts over integrity, I simply refused to let her destroy mine in the process. The fake money in that bag was never meant to trap her, it was meant to protect me. The GPS tracker wasn't installed out of suspicion, it was installed out of wisdom gained from years in a cutthroat business world. The cameras weren't recording because I expected betrayal, they were recording because I had learned to hope for the best, while preparing for the worst. Everything that happened to Ria was the natural consequence of her own choices. I just made sure those consequences couldn't be avoided or escaped. Today, when I look back on that night when I handed over the bag with fake money, I realize it was the most valuable investment I ever made. It cost me a marriage that was built on lies, revealed the true character of someone I thought I knew, and taught me that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones sleeping in your own bed. But it also gave me something priceless, the knowledge that I am strong enough to survive betrayal, smart enough to protect myself from those who would exploit my trust, and successful enough to build a life that no one can steal from me. And when former friends or colleagues ask me what I would do differently if I could go back, I tell them the truth, absolutely nothing. Because sometimes you need to lose everything fake to appreciate everything real. The bag may have been filled with worthless paper, but the lessons it taught me were worth their weight in gold. What would you have done in this situation? Was this revenge perfectly justified, or did it go too far? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal, justice, and the price we pay for trusting the wrong people. Because in the end, every lie has its reckoning, and every betrayal casts a shadow that follows the betrayer forever. Stay sharp, stay strong, and never forget, the best revenge is a life so successful that your enemies become footnotes in your success story.